All right, hello everyone, and welcome back. My name is Magduit, and we're here again with another video. Sorry I missed the Friday video. Ended up being a little bit distracted, but I hope that this makes up for it, and expect a video this Friday as well. So, yeah, today I wanted to go over habits and art and how they are very related to one another, and what you can do to utilize old habits that are good, or break old habits that are bad, and maybe even learn new habits that are good, and maybe avoid new habits that are bad. So, yeah, I guess I have a couple of things I just wanted to go over. To start off, why is it worth to try new things? Like, why is it worth it? Like, is there any value to it? And I came up with a couple of ideas. I think that it forces you to get outside of your comfort zone. So, from an artist perspective, that's really helpful, especially if you're trying to keep putting things out into the world. I also think that you'll discover new things which you might actually like more than the old stuff that you had previously been used to. Um, and I think that it's essentially fuel. Like, doing new things is like fuel for the fire of creative experience and creative output. And I think that if you're doing new things, it is very, very difficult to get writer's block. I would say that out of the 14 years that I've been making music, I've never really experienced this perspective of writer's block, because I've always been trying new stuff. And I hear people that, struggle with that get writer's block, and I just haven't fully been able to understand what that is. And I think the biggest reason why is because I'm always trying stuff that is new and that is novel to me, and that just keeps me making new stuff. Um, let's piggyback off of that whole ideology and talk about how do you get into the habit of forming new habits, especially as an artist, because I think that is something that a lot of people have struggled with, and I have had bouts of struggling with that throughout my life, which I will discuss later in this video. But let me just go over some of the ideas that I'd come up with on how you can do that. So the first thing is and this is just kind of the most analytical way of approaching this, but I think the first thing to try is to limit yourself. Limit yourself while you're doing things inside of the DAW. Recently, I've been a part of the bunting flock, and it's been a great place for me to test these sorts of things by doing things like the sample studies, where we're trying to create very specific samples and learning how to do that, or the flock flips, where we have a limited amount of time. So time is the constraint there, and you only have an hour, maybe an hour and a half or longer, depending on how we're feeling that day. But it's a limiting factor. And I would say, even when it comes to my sound designing, and using things like reference tracks, like in my own workflow, there are these sort of I don't know what to call them, like an obelisk, or like an object or a thing that I am looking at to try and strive to achieve this goal. So, like, for example, when it comes to sound design, maybe I'll watch a tutorial on how to sound design a specific thing, and then I will try to be very diligent in achieving the process of getting that experience, that sound, or whatever it is. And then I will then kind of go back and take away what I enjoyed and what I did not enjoy from that experience. And it's always a tutorial that's very open-ended and that's more broad in the form of its education. Utilizing a specific tool might be beneficial, but I think that, keeping an open-ended education on how to use the tool is kind of what I'm saying. Like, from an analytical standpoint, I'm not looking to like get a specific type of sound exactly, but I am trying to learn the ideologies behind how this individual reached that point. So I hope all of that makes sense. It's long story short, I think that referencing other individuals and trying to learn from them is another really good way of forming a new habit. So, another way to kind of almost trick yourself into forming new habits is to gamify the experience of limiting yourself. So, um, like I was saying, obviously there's the flock flips and the sound sample study stuff that we're doing inside of the flock, as well as, there have been times where I have challenged myself just arbitrarily. I'm only going to use this tool, or I'm only going to use this, set of plugins or something like that. And that has helped me out tremendously, just from it's almost like you're forcing yourself to do something that you're really not gonna like, but because it's like gamified, like either you're doing it with other people or you're just challenging yourself, and maybe you're just trying to see if you can even do it. It ends up making the experience, I would say, more beneficial because you learn more about what it is that you're doing. And I think that all of these things can be benefited by doing it with a clear head. And I'm going to go further into this video. But for me, something that has really helped my creative output and the quality of my creative output is the lack of drugs, which I'm going to go into a little bit later, but that really has helped me on my journey to being more excited about what it is that I'm doing, which is surprising. I know it surprised me, but it's something that I think I will definitely want to talk about. But that's just something that I would recommend to you. It's kind of another form of limiting yourself. And then another thing that's helped me out is incorporating my environment into my productions. So whether that's grabbing a microphone, whether you have a really expensive microphone or even a cell phone, either one works. A field recorder, like anything that lets you record sound, I think is a really nice way of adding to the ability to you to form new habits, because what you're doing is you're essentially going to go out into the world and collect something to bring into your computer. So you're not just stuck inside the computer, but you're actually, who knows, maybe going on a walk and, seeing some cool stuff, or hanging out with people, or, the list of stuff goes on. But long story short, you're getting new inspiration, which gives you the ability to be excited about trying something new with that inspiration. So a lot of the times when I'm wanting to do, I don't know, like something where, like, if I'm using a new plugin or learning how to use a new plugin or piece of software, and I'm doing it with something that is completely novel from a recording standpoint, then what ends up happening is I'm more excited about using that new plugin or new piece of software or whatever. And I don't know if that works for other people, but for me, it's really exciting because, it's like that ownership makes me more excited about what it is that I'm doing. So because I went out and I recorded this sound myself, I have more ownership over the sound, which makes me more excited about trying these new things with the sound. I think the last thing that I really want to talk about when it comes to forming new habits, or at least getting into the habit of forming new habits, is to not worry about the results of the habit that you're trying to form. I think a lot of the times, especially in my past, I would go into something expecting a result to, appear that, because I put in all of this work and energy, I'm expecting to get this outcome, and that ends up being very defeating. It deflates your ability to get excited about the new thing, because you're so focused on trying to do something that is, I guess I should say, impossible. Like, I don't think that there's any way to do something that you've never done before and, do it exactly the way that you want to do it. It's always going to be a learning experience, which means that there's going to be some things that you'll get right and some things that you'll get wrong, and that's okay. Like, it's all about doing it in the first place. And I think a better approach is to just set that challenge, limit yourself, or do whatever it is that you want to do habitually. Like, set that challenge for yourself and then just explore, like don't set boundaries for the results, but just set boundaries for what it is that you're supposed to be doing. So maybe the first few times that you try this new thing, it doesn't work out. And that's okay. But what you're able to do is, instead of focusing on the results that you were expecting, you're focusing on the actual results. So, maybe after the third time you've tried something, you might go, wow, like some of this stuff I really don't get, but there are a few ideas in this that I think are really cool that I'm going to apply in my own creative process or even my own life in general. And then sooner or later, you'll start to feel more excited about whatever it is that you're doing. Just because you're not focused on achieving a very specific thing, but you're more focused on trying to do whatever it is that you want to do. And I think that ends up benefiting you in the process of creating music, and more importantly, creating new habits, which I think is really helpful as an artist who wants to keep growing. So that is or are some ideas on how you can try and get into the habit of creating new habits. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is when to try new things and when to keep doing what works. This is kind of just a quick sort of section here, but I wanted to go over it because it's important. Because it's like, well, when do I need to do something that is, when is an old habit bad and when is a new habit something that I need? And I think the question and answer is sort of simpler than people would think. I think that if you're happy with what you're doing and it's making you happy from a, I would say even a spiritual level or even soulful level, then why stop doing it? Like why change what works, kind of a thing. But if you're unhappy with what it is that's going on and that you're doing, then why not try something different? Like why keep running on the proverbial hamster wheel if it's not, getting you anywhere? So it's one of those things where if you're happy, then you're good. But if you really aren't happy, then I would recommend trying to just do something different. Especially with music, I think that there have been many times in my life where I would make a song and be really excited about it, and then I would like stack it up next to another song, and I would just be like, oh my gosh, this sounds horrible. Like my song, rather. This sounds like trash. And it would basically demotivate me and make me unhappy. And so what I did is I just started doing different stuff. Like obviously there is a lot that goes into a song, but even changing one small thing can at least get you a little bit closer to where you want to be, instead of just, staying exactly where you are. And I think that even if you're making a small improvement, then you're going to feel good about it, because it's one of those things where you don't have to turn into a mega superstar, awesome artist to be able to enjoy your work. Like I think the goal is to enjoy your work all the time. And I think that sort of mentality is helpful. So yeah, if you're doing something and it makes you happy, just keep doing it. But if it doesn't make you happy, then try something different. So now let's go into a little bit more of like a personal route here. What new things have I been doing specifically that have helped me with my music creation and my creative journey? So some of the new habits that I have developed include things like watching other people and actively listening to what it is that they're teaching, and then incorporating what it is that they have taught into my workflow. So that includes, from an active listening perspective, that includes things like writing notes, making sure that I try the ideologies that they're trying to teach more than one time. Like it's not just like this one and done thing, but more of a practice sort of thing. So, I'll maybe revisit that video multiple times. I will revisit my notes multiple times. I'll even do things like set up tools for me to make the process of what they're doing a little bit easier for me. So that includes stuff like making racks in Ableton or making patcher presets in FL or even grid patches inside of Bitwig. The idea is I'm creating tools for myself to actually expedite the process of basically having to do the entire learning process every single time, which I think is something that people should get into. So if you haven't started trying to make tools that help you achieve your goals faster, I would recommend giving it a shot. It may not work out the first few times, but at least, like I was saying, with the experience and practicing of it, I'm sure it will get easier, as it has gotten easier for me. So what other things have I been doing? I've been experimenting a lot with new ideas and tools. So from the ideas perspective, I will literally come up with something out of nowhere. Like there's just moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, this would be a cool, interesting concept. And I won't even be at my computer. I'll be like, sometimes I'll be in the shower. Sometimes I'll be maybe just out at work or something, or maybe I'll be like just out at a restaurant or anything, literally like anywhere but my computer. And what I'll do is, instead of basically letting that idea just kind of disappear into the nothingness of my mind, I'll write it down. And because I write it down, I will then use that from a very logical perspective to basically come up with something that I want to do or that I want to work on. So it's one of those things where a lot of the racks that I've built, a lot of the tools that I've been teaching about are originally ideas that I wrote down. And I think that I can't stress enough how important that is, because like there's so many great ideas that I'm sure everyone comes up with that are just lost to oblivion because we didn't write them down, and our minds just aren't that good at remembering stuff that is actually a really good idea. So yeah, writing things down that you come up with is critical. And actually what got me into that whole perspective was the idea of rapping and writing for lyric related things. I never really understood that concept until I started writing down lyrics. And then I started noticing like I would write down lyric, like 1 or 2 line ideas, while I would come up with them. And then I started realizing, well, why don't I just do that with everything? So then I started writing down, everything that I would come up with that I thought was a good idea. And then, yeah, back to the other thing is experimenting with tools. So this isn't a necessary thing, but I think it's exciting to take a tool like, and by tool, I mean anything from an instrument, a plugin, maybe it's something that isn't even that. Maybe it's just a piece of software. Maybe it's, anything really that revolves around creativity and art. Taking that and just seeing what I can do with it, kind of not reading the manual, just kind of going balls to the wall and just seeing what can I make with this. And then if I'm excited about it, usually I won't have to read any manuals or anything like that. But if I don't understand something, I'll find myself looking up a manual, looking up things that can help me better understand it. And then I'll usually create, more with it. And that's been a reoccurring theme that I think helps with the whole entire creative process, is just finding new tools and messing with them. And I think that it's also really fun because you have no idea what's going to happen. So you may as well just see what happens. And if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you move on to the next tool. And yeah, I think it's a fun thing to try. Another thing that I've been doing is working in groups. So I think that when you're by yourself, it's very easy to just kind of get not into a rut per se, but it's very easy to stay complacent with whatever it is that you're doing. It's very easy to be like, you know what, everything I'm doing is perfectly fine, which isn't a bad thing. I think that periodically doing that is great. And I would say that at least half the time should probably be spent doing that. But the flip side of that is half of the other time that you spend in the DAW should probably be with other people, just so that they can give you at least their perspective Even if it isn't something that you agree with, it's at least another set of ears and or eyes that can help you better understand what it is that you're doing and whether or not you really do agree with it. Because there's a lot of situations in my own personal creative experience where, I thought something was really cool, and then someone would show me how you could make it even cooler, and it would be that it would definitely get cooler and like more exciting. And I think that it's worth talking to others people or working with other people directly to essentially get outside of that complacent kind of, I don't want to call it a rut because that makes it sound very bad. It's not horrible, but I think that there's this dualistic nature of experience that you should appreciate. And the experience is, yes, you should definitely, make your own music, experience your own experience, and create your own art. But at the same time, it is worth dabbling, one could say, in other people's experiences and other people's art and seeing what they can show you directly. And yeah, that I think helps a lot with creative output and just new habits and all that kind of stuff. Like, you'll find that a lot of people have really good ideas, not just you. And yeah, another thing that I've been doing, and this is just something that really is about time management and scheduling, but spending more time in the DAW. And a lot of that isn't always time making music specifically. But when I am making music, I find myself almost scheduling it most of the time. And I find that that has helped me create more music. If you schedule, and this is why I love the flock flips are a great example of this. When you schedule 2 days out of the week to spend making a song, and you give yourself an hour or an hour and a half to make this song, you'll find that you can actually put out a lot of music, or at least creatively come up with a ton of really good ideas, and it not be like this big thing. Like, there have been times where I probably spent like, I don't know, 8 to 10 hours in the DAW for a week, right? Maybe not a week straight, but like a week, maybe like 4 days out of that week, and been less productive than I would be in, technically what with the flock flips, it's 2 days a week. So that's like maybe 2 to 3 hours of time in 2 weeks, or in a full week, sorry, and been more productive doing that than, a full week of like 40 hours of music. So it's just something to keep in mind, where if you're scheduling the time that you're in the DAW and trying to spend more time in the DAW being a scheduled thing, you're going to end up, I think, at least from my own experience, putting out better art and more, I would say, creative art, because it's a big deal then, right? Like, just being in the DAW isn't this like whatever thing. It's like a big deal because you're scheduling it, you're planning for it. It's, you have like a cutoff time, right? Like, there's a time where you're going to have to be like, all right, well, I'm done for today, or something along those lines. And it helps you value the time more, so you end up wasting the time less. And I think that ends up with you spending more time in the DAW, at the very least spending the time more wisely in the DAW. But yeah, that's something that I've been doing a lot recently as well. So the last thing I've been doing a lot of is just trying as many new things as I possibly can. This kind of goes back to the previous point, but I just can't stress it enough. Like, if you're not trying something that you haven't done before, almost not every single time you hop in the DAW, but almost every single time that you hop in the DAW, then you're doing yourself a disservice, because you're essentially missing out on the opportunity to grow. And I think that's why when it comes to the art that I've been putting out recently, I've been so proud and excited about it, is because I know what works. And I've tried so many different things. And that's why I know what works, because I'm experimenting, and then I, find this one thing that I've experimented with that works. And then I keep doing that. but then I keep experimenting with new things and I find out, oh my gosh, this thing that I thought works less well than this new thing that I found out that works. And it's just this reoccurring theme of finding new things that work even better than the previous things that you thought worked well. So, yeah, I think that trying as many new things as possible, especially inside the DAW or outside the DAW, either one works, I suppose, but especially inside the DAW, is imperative to creating more art that's high quality and being more proud of your art and seeing growth in yourself. So, yeah, those are some of the new things that I've been doing, and I hope that you can benefit from all of that. So, let's talk about what things I've been doing since I started producing, because I've been producing for 14 years, which isn't as long as some people, but it's a pretty long time. And I think that these things haven't changed, surprisingly, throughout this entire experience. I'm talking about new habits and how to form them. I thought it'd be important to talk about old habits that just haven't really changed. The first thing is approaching the DAW with a playful mindset. I think that a lot of people struggle with this, especially when they're starting out. And thinking back, I may have a little bit, but not really. When I approached the DAW, it was like a toy to me. It wasn't this thing like I'm going to treat this as a job, not going to treat this as a career. I just found this thing and I was like, wow, this is super fun. This feels amazing to experience. And I think that has been a reoccurring theme. There have been, if there are any times, it's been few and far between where I have approached the DAW and sat down and viewed it as this job. I think the key is to not think too hard from a logical perspective or an emotional perspective. I think just letting the entire experience become a flow state experience and using that flow state as a way to accomplish the goal of creating the art is the best way to make music. I don't think there is any other way to make good music. There may be, maybe I'm wrong, and if I am wrong, obviously you can let me know. But I think the best way is to just enter that flow state and do as much as you possibly can with that flow stated mind. So for those who may not know what a flow state is, it's almost like a place of existence mentally where you are just letting ideas come and go freely. It's almost meditation, honestly. It is essentially meditation while doing something. And the ideas come and go freely, and you may just let the idea happen and you do it, or maybe you even let the idea happen, you do it, decide it doesn't work, and immediately retract the idea and keep going, right? Like there's never a moment where you're not functioning and creating and doing something. It's really quite fun. And during those moments, I shouldn't say moments, periods of time when I am flow stated, time just like almost disappears. Like there have been times where I've been working on music in a flow state for 4 to 6 hours. And I'm like, what just happened? Like I've come up with a whole entire song. I love it. Sounds great. Tried a bunch of new stuff, tried a bunch of old stuff. And like it's the best way to work. And I've been doing that since the beginning. I've always done that. When I enter the DAW, there's very rarely a time where I'm not in a flow state. I guess the exception to that is there are some times when I am referencing other stuff, like maybe trying to learn from a video. Those are probably the exceptions to where I might not be fully in a flow state. But when it comes to making a song that is my own, the flow state is imperative. So yeah, that is important. And I think that the only way to do that is to be playful with the ideology of making the song in the first place. Like if you're kind of setting a bunch of boundaries that are too specific, you're going to be potentially, detracting from the opportunity to enter that state of mind. So yeah. Another thing that I've been doing since I've started producing is using plugins that feel good. And basically by this I mean I'm not forcing myself to use a plugin or a tool, I should probably say, um, just because someone else is using it. Uh, Most of the time when I'm doing it for me because I find it fun, and that's that. Like there have been many times where I have tried things and I just didn't find it fun, so I just didn't keep doing it. And I've come back periodically and tried them again, and you know what? I usually find myself finding it more fun now, especially. But even when I was going through some of my most difficult moments, um, I was always doing what I thought was fun. I couldn't bring myself to do something just because someone else had done it, and maybe they're getting like 100,000 subscribers or something. They have like some crazy number of people who believe in them or follow them. I have never really been a person that fully adheres to that ideology. Now I'm willing to try. Obviously, I'm willing to try. If that person has a good idea and I think it's cool to try it, I'll try it. But if I don't like it, I'm not going to just do it because someone else is doing it. And this applies to like, yeah, pretty much everything, not just plugins, but even from like a hardware perspective or any kind of tool. Like if you don't enjoy using the tool, don't use the tool. So that's another thing I've been doing since I started producing. Another thing that I've been doing is treating the experience as a medicinal thing. So I really do view that like music, the idea of creating music is no different than drinking enough water or getting enough fresh air or sunlight. Like it's such an important part of feeling good from a holistic and soulful perspective that I just can't imagine not doing it. And I think that's like a really interesting thing that even when I was in 8th grade and I started making music, it felt like that to me. Like it was just, I'm afraid to call it an addiction, but it may just very well be. But it's one of those things that I just can't imagine not doing it. Especially on a regular basis. Like, I don't think I've missed a day of being inside of the DAW or with an instrument for at least a period of time in years, probably like at least 2 or 3 years. And if I did, I was certainly feeling it. So like, meaning I was missing that. I felt like I needed to do it, even though I couldn't, because sometimes life is like that. But yeah, so I think that valuing it very highly has helped me because I've treated it like something that isn't just, for whatever. It's like very important to my well-being. I feel like it's allowed me to treat it with more pride and dignity. Like I feel like because it's important to me, it should be important to other people, which means that it should be valued. There's not a lack of value in something that makes you happy. And yeah, that's just something that I think has been a very helpful thing for at least my entire music career thus far. So yeah, I've been doing that since the beginning. Another thing I've been doing is listening to feedback. So the idea of listening to feedback is sometimes difficult for a lot of people, and I can respect that. Some people have their ideas and they are sticking to them, which I can respect, and I'm not saying that that's wrong. But for me, what I have found is that feedback has allowed me to, at the very least, expand upon my own perspective within my own like conscious ability. So like if I hear somebody tell me something like, I don't know, let's just say, for example, your low end in this bass is too boomy or loud, right? Like if I hear that, I'm going to go, okay, well, let me hear if that is true. So I will go and, make the change with a couple of different ideas. Maybe I'll use an EQ, maybe I'll use a filter, which are kind of the same thing, but maybe I'll use something completely different. Maybe I'll compress it and just compress the low end with a multiband compressor or whatever, right? Like I'll do whatever it is that I think is right to try and ameliorate their opinion of what is wrong. And I will make a decision then whether or not what their idea was right or wrong. If it sounds better, then I will, without a doubt, agree with their idea. And I'll be thankful for it because I was willing to at least experiment and see, okay, is it actually going to be better because of their idea? And if it is, yeah, I stick with it, and I'm always appreciative of that. And if it's not, then, there's Control Z. There's a lot of ways to undo stuff that you've done, and I'll just move on with whatever it is that I was doing. And, like, it's important to, I think, listen to feedback because it lets you grow. It lets you come up with new ideas and new things that you may not have known worked. And I think the most important thing from a feedback perspective is if you hear it from a lot of people, if you've asked the same question to, let's say, 20 people and 19 of them are telling you the same thing, I think it's definitely worth diving a little bit deeper into whatever it is that those people were trying to tell you. Because even if it isn't exactly the way that you even if they didn't perceive it exactly the way you perceived it, and even if the way that you're trying to solve the issue that they are experiencing isn't working the way you want it to, which is, like, for example, like if that low end issue, right? Like, let's say I was like trying to maybe add reverb to it or something, right? Like that wouldn't obviously, like, I shouldn't say obviously, but that might not work. And it might make it sound worse, but that might be the only way that I know how to fix the issue at the time. So because of that, it's one of those things where I won't just accept that whatever it is that I was doing was right or wrong. I will just dive deeper and try and learn a lot about the specific issue and maybe how to solve it. And a lot of content exists on the internet now for that. It's really cool that there's a whole entire, just a plethora of information online that you can utilize to experiment and understand how to achieve the goal of trying to basically remove those people from saying that issue, like to help them maybe find something else to focus on that you need to improve on. And yeah, that's basically how I approach feedback. And I've approached it that way since I started making music, and I've been very thankful for it because I feel like it has helped me a lot with how I've improved my music. And yeah, I think it's worth trying. At the very least, if you don't like it, then you don't have to keep doing it. But I think that if you do try it, it may surprise you because there's a lot of cool things that people know. It's one of those things where we all have ears, we all hear things differently, but there are some generalized truths that seem to proliferate from, experiences like I just described, where you have a large number of people telling you something, and maybe it's worth listening. Only you can decide that. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is kind of a fun one, I think, is using a computer. I have used a computer since the very beginning. There has never been a time that I was making music and didn't have a computer to help me make that music. DAWs are really, quite frankly, amazing. I can't imagine what life was like prior to DAWs because, luckily I can a little bit. When I was going to school, there were a lot of situations where we worked with tape and like reel-to-reel tape and things like that, and we were splicing tape, and it's one of those things where, like, that is just so foreign to me because I can't imagine why you would ever want to do that now when you could just use a computer. So I think for anyone who's maybe really, really new to music and isn't sure if they have like everything they need or everything they want or whatever, is if you have a computer with a DAW, you without a doubt have everything you need to make music. You do not need anything else. And I can say that with full confidence, which is really awesome because if you are out there and you want to learn how to make music, you should know that you really don't need anything else. The want for other things comes from a place of inspiration, usually. So, sometimes there are new tools that get us inspired to do new things, and the new things generate new ideas, and then the new ideas turn into, either completed pieces of work or potentially things that we want to hear more of. But yeah, you get the idea. The goal isn't always to get a bunch of new stuff. The goal should be to use what you have as much as you can. So yeah, I think that using a computer is without a doubt a must. If you're an artist today, I can't imagine why you wouldn't want to learn about a DAW. Even if all you do is play an instrument, having a DAW will help you tremendously with improving your ability to articulate that instrument in whatever way you could think of, which is exciting to say the very least. So those are some of the things that I have been doing since I started producing. So I guess now I kind of want to go into a little bit about the idea of tools, especially because of what we were just talking about, and how new tools and old tools, I would say, are equally important, meaning they're all basically the same. But there are pros and cons to both, or I should say pros and pros to both. And yeah, I just wanted to go over some of those. So first of all, with new tools, I think the coolest part about new tools in general is they're applying new technology and new ideas to a process which then creates opportunity for better and quicker alternatives to what would previously be maybe even impossible. So, going back to what I was just talking about, like having a DAW versus reel-to-reel tape, now we can basically be the orchestra. We can be the symphony of musical instruments, and all we are is some person with a computer. That's all you need, and then suddenly you can become what would have been an entire group of people having to work together. And because of that, it allows you to do a lot of other stuff. So because you have these new tools that are allowing you to do things that could have never been done before by one person, it allows you to, I would say, achieve bigger and sometimes more extravagant results. So yeah, that's one of the cool things about new tools that I think is important. To continue on with the idea of equality, though, old tools, I think, are things that have been proven to work. And I think many times they create a more convoluted yet exciting workflow. So like older tools may require a little bit more like elbow grease, but you're going to literally feel every, if we're talking about outside of the music experience, maybe we're talking about like screwing in a screw into a piece of wood, right? A drill or a screwdriver, like a screw shooter, I guess is the technical term, might get it done in a quick second. You don't even have to really like experience it at all. Like you just kind of push and hold down the trigger. But if you're using a screwdriver, you're going to feel every single little twist of that screw. And because of that, maybe you don't split the wood ever with a screwdriver, because once that screw has hit the top of the wood, you can feel that. You can feel that the screw is there, versus with a screw shooter, you have a whole mechanical engine that's doing that for you. So you don't feel any of that. So there's a level of disconnect between your ability to fundamentally understand what's happening by utilizing new tools versus old tools. So I think from a fundamentals perspective, old tools are really good. And yeah, it doesn't mean that you can't get the job done with the old tools either. Like the old tools obviously have worked. It just requires a little bit more energy to get the result that you want, which can sometimes be frustrating. I know that in my experience, I have kind of had I think, a nice balance between old and new tools where, if I can do something, a perfect example is something like Soothe. It's a tool that's pretty expensive, but it's a great tool because you're essentially using a dynamic EQ that's very high quality and very precise and controllable to remove resonances that you might not want. And you can do that with a normal dynamic EQ. You could even do it with a regular EQ and automation. But the problem with this is that to get that result that you're wanting from Soothe, it would take probably 30 minutes of what I would consider time in the weeds, where you're just sitting there trying to dial in knobs. And at that point, is your brain even really aware of what's going on? Are you really able to make the right judgment because you've been listening to this one sound for 30 minutes? Or would you rather just chuck this one tool on there and adjust it slightly or a lot, depending? But my point is, adjust it and take maybe 5 to 10 minutes max to get the result that you wanted, so that you can then move on and do bigger and better things with your project. So yeah, that's where I think, obviously old tools are great, but there are some things about them that I think just add too much time to the process, which takes away from the big picture. So that's my thought there. I think new tools are also very helpful for sparking inspiration. They're not necessary, but there have been so many times where I get a new tool, and just by having the new tool, it lights a fire under my butt to just keep making a bunch of stuff. There are a ton of these, like especially within the plugin world, but even from the hardware perspective. And even if the new tool is actually an old tool, a good example of this is I have a cassette deck, and it's literally sitting here right in front of me. And I hadn't pulled it out in a while, but I got it probably 4 or 5 years ago. And I barely use it, but when I do use it, it excites me a lot because the sound of it is so unique and interesting. And it's a piece of hardware that is very unique. So because of the uniqueness, it's like, even though it's old, it's new from the novelty perspective to me. And that makes me want to create new things. So a new tool doesn't have to necessarily be new. It just has to be, from a time perspective. But I think as long as it's something novel to you, it will inspire you to make art, which is what the goal here is to create more, to keep creating more, to not get writer's block, to develop new habits, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think that new tools are great for that. I think that old tools also have some benefits when it comes to cost. So old tools are usually cheaper, and they're sometimes free. And they usually apply, once again, the more fundamental practice, where the new tool is probably just going to automatically do stuff. So yeah, I think the cost is important. So if you are, once again, we're going to go back to Soothe here, but if you really don't have the money to afford Soothe, then it shouldn't be this thing that you're so bummed out about. It's really not the end of the world. You can definitely use an EQ with automation or a dynamic EQ that you could get for free and still do exactly what Soothe is doing. Maybe not to a T, right? It may not be the exact same thing, but as I was describing earlier, you're going to actually have more control than Soothe would, which means in certain situations, you might actually be able to get it to sound better than Soothe because you have the ability to fine tune everything. So yeah, that's just an example of why old tools are usually just better in that regard. They're usually cheaper, and yeah, they allow for that fundamental approach where you can actually do exactly what you want to have happen. And then the last thing is new tools are not necessary, and I think that the same can be said for old tools. All of it is the same. What matters is you have tools, right? So one could say that stock plugins in a DAW are all you need. All you need is the stock plugins, and you can make good music. Sometimes it will be more difficult, sometimes it will be easier, but you can definitely do it. And that's what matters. As long as you have tools in the first place, that's the key. So, from the ground up level, I would say getting a computer, for example, is the most important thing. If you do not have a functional computer, I think that making music will be very difficult for you. So that's something that I would recommend focusing on, especially from a monetary perspective, above all else. And then once you have that set up, obviously getting a DAW that you enjoy and that you know works. And then maybe after that, worrying about maybe plugins or other pieces of software that can help you create more music. And yeah, so I just wanted to go over that. That's why new tools and old tools are equally important. So I kind of want to just jump here. We're jumping off of a ledge and we're going to a totally different topic. And this is just going to be my personal journey related to forming new habits and sobriety. So before I started my journey to sobriety, I was definitely still making music. You know, it's not like I wasn't making music. And I had a lot of fun doing it. It wasn't like I wasn't enjoying the process of making music, but I noticed that I would keep making the same music. I wouldn't say identical, of course, but there were habits that I just could not shake. A good example is the fact that for a very long time, I was using the same exact DAW. And not to say that the DAW wasn't good. It was a great, and still is a great DAW. It's just that I realized that I was basically limiting myself by not being able to do more than just one thing. Even though it's not one thing, of course, but like you get what I mean. Like having multiple perspectives allows you to create exactly what you want to make. And you'll find that those different perspectives are what will allow you to basically create really cool art, because you're maybe, so like in my case, I use 3 different DAWs now. And because of that, I'm able to make very specific types of sounds that I know I can achieve very quickly and easily in each of these DAWs. And that is super exciting for me because I know that I can't do it in the other ones. You know, like in one DAW, I can do something and then the other ones I can't. And the same is true across the board. And maybe that's just the way my brain works, or maybe it's because I was more excited about certain things in some DAWs and less excited about other things in another. But long story short, I was stuck, you know, like I really, before I started this journey to sobriety, I was stuck and I didn't even have that option, right? Like I didn't even have the ability to decide that for myself. I was kind of just stuck doing whatever I could do, which was usually not repetitive, but it was just too much of the same stuff. You know, I was learning, but at a very, I would say, stunted rate. And because of that, it shaped my ability to think what I could do. So like by that, I mean, I thought that I could only do, you know, or only make music in one DAW, where actually I can make music in 3 DAWs at the same time and it sounds awesome. Like it's really cool. So like I never thought I'd be able to do that in my wildest dreams when I was dealing with addiction. But obviously since I have started my journey, it's like nothing is standing in my way from trying anything, especially if it excites me. And it's one of those things where, you know, I would hear things being created in these other DAWs that I really liked, but I just never felt like I could do what they were doing. You know, I never thought that it would be possible just because of the learning curve and all that stuff. But yeah, no, here I am now using 3 DAWs. So it is a lot easier, I would say, with a sober mind to try new things in that regard, especially if there's like a high like learning curve, is what I meant to say there. So yeah, basically I still made stuff, but I would say certain habits were almost fundamental to my workflow. And because of this, I felt trapped in a loop of being unable to make stuff that I was proud of. So it's one of those things where this comes down to everyone's own personal opinion of what it is that they're making. But for me, my opinion of my own work was not very good. You know, even though I was making music, I wasn't happy with the music that I was making. And what's interesting is as soon as I started the journey to sobriety, I realized that I had more energy to try stuff that I had never tried before. Um, and because of this ability to do stuff that I thought was impossible to me, um, the perspective on my music changed drastically. Um, I basically became proud of what I was doing, not overnight, but in a very short period of time, it felt like. Um, and because of that, I now have a much different view on what it is that I'm doing, and in turn have been making, I would say, more music that I want to put out into the world. Now, you're talking to someone who still has not put out a song under the Magduit name officially. So take this with a grain of salt. But my journey of sobriety has been short. So it's something that, I am new to, but I'm very excited about because I finally have things that I believe are really exciting. And I am going to be, and I have been working on putting these things out into the world. It's just that there is a certain level of refinement that I am basically striving for. And what's cool is in the past, I guess it's almost a year now, I have been able to basically leap towards this goal, which probably could have happened a long time ago if I wasn't distracted. But my point is, in such a short period of time, I've been able to make these leaps towards my goal. And I don't think it would have been possible without the ability to be completely with it, just I am present at all moments. And because of that, it allows me to feel really good about what I'm doing. And I think there's probably a dopamine relation there because now pretty much all my dopamine goes towards music creation. So, when I'm in the DAW now, it feels, I would say, even better than it did back when I was working on music with the use of substances. So, yeah, I would say it's something that I don't think everyone needs to do. I'm not trying to say that, but for me in my journey, it has really helped me become more excited about what it is that I'm making. And because of that, it makes me feel like I want to put it out into the world more. So, yeah, really excited about the journey. And to anyone out there who has thought about it, I think it's worth just listening to your thoughts. I don't think you should listen to what people tell you very much when it comes to this. But I do think you should listen to yourself. And if there's a part of you that feels like you could be doing more if you weren't distracted by some of these things, then I think it's worth exploring that challenge. Gamify the experience. See what happens when you are completely sober and making music. And if you don't like it, then go back to what it was that you were doing. But yeah, for me, I can't imagine why I would ever want to go back to who I was even a year ago. So, yeah, I hope that wasn't too real, but is inspiring instead for anyone out there who really wants to keep making music and continue to get better at making music. So, I'm going to move on to the last part of the video here. I appreciate anyone who is still listening. This is a long video, but it's an important one to me. I want to just end the video with 10 different ideas, 5 new and 5 old, just things that I have been doing recently and things that I've been doing forever that hopefully will help you in your learning experience or at least musical career. So some of the 5 new things that I've been doing are playing musical instruments and using software and hardware that are, I would say, a little bit more interactive. I think that getting an instrument to play is probably the best thing you can do as a musician. The thing that actually got me into the idea of playing instruments is something called the jaw harp, or the Jew's harp, I think it's also called. And it's such a fun, like, I mean, it's such a cool instrument. It basically turns your mouth and body into this full resonating uh, instrument, as well as obviously the harp itself. But it's like it's an instrument that includes you. You know, it's an instrument that makes you feel like you're a part of the sound, which I think is awesome. And because of that, that's really what got me into playing piano. Now I play a lot of piano. Pretty much piano is like my main instrument now. But the jaw harp was probably my go-to for, I want to say, a year and a half to 2 years. It really helped me feel connected to making music with an instrument. So I think that if you don't have an instrument, you should get a jaw harp. No, I'm just kidding. Get whatever instrument you think excites you the most. But yeah, I think getting an instrument will help you tremendously with creating music, because it's so much more human and interactive than anything that you will find inside of your DAW. Now, when I was saying using hardware and software, I think those can also be good, but usually they're in conjunction with these very tried and true instruments, like, for example, the piano or my jaw harp, or I have a cajon now as well, and I've been drumming more. Um, anything that's real, you know, anything that's tangible that you can feel and touch and smack hard or smack soft, or, you know, whatever really feels the most tactile to you is what I would recommend. So another new thing I've been doing is watching a lot of long form educational content, and then applying that content. That's just, I'm going to reiterate, that's so helpful. I mean, if you can apply even a fifth, no, a tenth of a long form content video that is from someone who knows what they're doing, you are winning. You are eclipsing people, because there are so many wonderful people out there who are educating and teaching really helpful things, and yeah, it's worth every single second of your time. So definitely, that has helped me tremendously. And I think that because I've been sober, the ability for me to retain a lot of that has increased, which helps as well. So yeah. Another new thing that I would recommend is I just use free plugins all the time now. Like, I will see what's the new one? Oh yeah, Spectral Suite, or MAME, or Buffer Override, or what's the other one? I think I wrote it down here. Oh yeah, Lo-Fi Oddity. All of those are great examples of free tools that just inspire, right? Like, why buy a plugin when you could also just get a free one that does the same thing, right? Like, so if you see something out there that is like, whoa, this sounds so cool, and it's free, I'm going to go ahead and say it now. I recommend jumping on that and trying it out, because what's the worst thing that could happen, right? You install it and maybe you don't like it, so maybe you uninstall it. Or keep it there and just organize your plugins like I have. But regardless, like, there's no loss, right? Like, what's the loss? Like, maybe you're a little bit lower on computer space, but that's like unlikely because plugins take up like no space at all. So there's really no detriment to like trying something new that's free. So yeah, that's been a huge what's the word here? Inspiration generator for me is free plugins. Especially the Spectral Suite from I think it's Andrew Riemann. Yeah, that guy is awesome. Such cool tools. Very thankful for that being free. I can't believe that it's free, rather, but it is. So you should try it out. But yeah, another thing that I have been doing is the idea of relying more on stock plugins inside of DAWs, especially now that I'm in 3 different DAWs. I think that the stock plugins inside every DAW help shape a very specific type of sound, and I think that that's awesome. Plus, they're really powerful. I think we as musicians underestimate them because there's so many companies out there going, you need this plugin, it's so much better than this plugin, or there's so many situations like that. But I would say everything that you have in your DAW is perfect. And I think a nice little pigtail or piggyback rather off of that is the squonker, which is another new thing that I've been using regularly. And that is all stock, all Ableton. And yeah, obviously the original seed for the idea didn't come from stock plugins, but when I realized how good it sounds from a stock plugin perspective, I just realized why not use stock plugins, and it sounds great. And that's something that I use pretty much all of the time now. I would say that it is a core fundamental part of my sound and within my sound design process. So if you haven't picked it up for free on my Patreon, I highly recommend it. At least if you're an Ableton Live 12 user. It's definitely an awesome tool, and yeah, I use it constantly. So yeah, stock plugins are the way, is all I can say. And then 5 old things that I have been using since the beginning, or doing since the beginning, is compressors and EQs. No matter what DAW you're in, they're so powerful. I mean, they are literally the key to creating better mixes, which are sometimes not obvious, especially if you're new to production. But the more you use them, the better you'll get with them. And I would recommend looking up tutorial videos. Like there's a 10-hour masterclass. If you just look up 10-hour masterclass compressors, it's the first thing that pops up on YouTube. And that whole video is amazing. I highly recommend looking that up, as well as just how to use EQs in general. You'll learn that mid-side EQ is amazing, and even left and right EQ is amazing too. But EQs in general are awesome. Same with compressors. Been using those since the beginning, and I don't think I'm ever going to stop. So yeah, that's the first old thing. FL Studio Edison is another thing that I've been using for such a long time, and you can either use this by obviously being in FL Studio, or if you have FL Studio, you can then use the FL Studio VST plugin inside of another DAW and then load up Edison. And I would say that Edison, in my humble opinion, is the best sampler that is out there. There's no better sampler. I would say Rolling Sampler comes close. It's a very close second, but Edison's just better. There's just no better tool that exists from a sampling perspective than that. And I love working with audio. So a plugin like that, or a tool like that makes working with audio so fun, is a must for me nowadays. So I highly recommend checking it out, or at least looking into it. So if you don't have FL Studio, it may be worth buying it. But yeah, another thing that I have been doing is using all the stock plugins. I just I'm just rehashing that, but it's so seriously useful to just use stock plugins inside of DAWs. I've been using the stock FL Studio stuff forever, and all of the stock plugins are just so good. And it's one of those things where it's worth using them. Like, even if there's Pro Q3, right? Like, I have Pro Q3. I barely pull that out. And don't get me wrong, Pro Q3 is great. It's better at doing a lot of things, but it doesn't mean that you can't get 90% of your work done, if not 100%, with a little bit of extra elbow grease, using your stock plugins. So yeah, highly recommend that. And that's one of the things I've been doing forever. Another thing I've been using is old samples. So I have been recording audio samples for not my entire production career, but I would say that's been a pretty sustained habit for at least 6 or 7 years. And I can't stress this enough. Why not record what it is that you're making, even if you don't plan on releasing the song? That's kind of my mentality, is like, why not turn it into something, even if it's not going to be a song? So I have lots of folders upon folders of sample libraries that I've made myself, and I use them constantly in my current work. And do yourself a favor and label them properly, organize them, because yes, it takes time, it takes energy, it's work, but if you do it, you will thank yourself in the future, because it will make it so easy to access them, to find what you need, to search for things. I can't imagine, uh, because at one point I did not organize as well as I do with these samples. So, probably like 8 to 10 years ago, I was definitely not this organized. And I wish I was, because I'm certain that even back then I was making things that I would use today. So start now. If you haven't started, start recording your sounds, start organizing your sounds, and make sure they're accessible to the future you, because you will be appreciative of it. So, yeah. And then the last thing that I've been using for quite a long time now is Vital. Vital is a free synthesizer, and if you haven't heard of it, you're hearing about it now. And I'd be surprised that you haven't heard of it, but you're hearing about it now. And it is literally the best thing that has ever happened to me from a sound design perspective. I was really afraid of synthesizers. I really didn't want to get into the idea of making my own stuff because of how confusing it was. I did learn a lot about synthesis in school, but it just didn't really seem exciting to me. And then Vital came out, and it was almost like, because I even had Serum before Vital came out, and it's just, I didn't feel like it was easy to understand because there was such a lack of visual feedback. But with Vital, there's so much visual feedback that it helps you understand exactly what's going on. And because of that, it makes you want to learn how to do stuff. Like, it's wild how cool that synth is. It's like, at one point, I didn't really want to learn how to sound design. And then Vital came out, and it was like it just became a game, right? It gamified the process of sound designing, which I think is more than most pieces of software and hardware can say. Like, and it's free, like, how can you not jump on that? It's an amazing tool. I highly recommend at least trying it out. And if you really don't like it, then that sucks, but I respect your opinion. But it is amazing. It's got everything you could ever need. It's got wavetables that that comes with it. You can import your own wavetables. You can make your own wavetables with it, and then export those wavetables to other synthesizers. It's got a lot of really cool things about it that I love. And I ended up buying it because it even has, for people who buy the synth, unlimited text-to-speech wavetable synthesis, which is really, really, really fun and inspiring. Yeah, definitely need to stress that. Like, Vital is the reason why I sound design the way that I sound design today. So yeah, definitely shout out to everyone over there who flexed to make that synth a reality, because it definitely changed my life, and I'm sure it's changed a lot of other people's as well. So yeah, and to anyone who didn't know about it, I highly recommend checking it out. It's a cool tool that will, I think, improve your sound. So yeah, that's this whole video. Thank you so much for sticking through it. I know it was a long one, but it was just stuff that I wanted to talk about and get off my chest. This is a new kind of thing for me. I've never done this before, so I hope that the talking head video isn't super obnoxious. I know I can sometimes get a little long-winded, but I like to be very concise and clear is probably the better word with my thoughts, which means I usually have to use a couple of more words with some feeling. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I love each and every one of you. Please comment, rate, or subscribe. Let me know what sucked. Let me know what didn't suck. Let me know if the video is too long. I'm going to make this one a lengthy one because I really wanted to talk about all of these things. And yeah, I guess don't forget to keep making music. Peace.